Great pleasure to be in Arklow. My first time to be the site of, the birth of the Irish offshore wind industry. And I was delighted to see, as a proud Welshman, as I came through the town, that Arklow's twinned with Aberystwyth, which is an excellent choice, so congratulations to all those involved in that. But it spoke to me about a certain symmetry, which is I think quite interesting, between the start of the offshore wind industry in Ireland, being in Arklow, and in the UK it was in North Wales. So, you know, I think there always has to be a place to start, and it's great to see those two places were the birthplace for offshore wind in Ireland and the UK. The thing that I'm very passionate about is ensuring that those two places don't just exist as the starting point, that they kick on and develop an industry that can support enormous amounts of economic activity. And in Wales, we saw two sites that innogy developed in North Wales, North Hoyle and Real Flats, and Gwynter Moor. And since then, it's been really an English story, and to a certain extent Scottish. And in Ireland, of course, we've seen Arklow Bank, and we haven't seen further development. Now, Arklow Bank was 2003, I think we heard. North Hoyle was 2004 in the UK. And there's one thing I think we probably all share in this room is I hate losing out to the English. So the one thing that drives my passion in this field at the moment is ensuring that Ireland and Wales, and Scotland too, develop at least the same rate as our English cousins, and if not quicker. And in offshore wind, we haven't quite matched that yet. So our task today is to ensure that we can set the path forward for developing Ireland at least as positively as the English, and possibly not quite as successful as the Welsh, but you know, we'll save that sort of rivalry for the Six Nations, shall we? So a little bit about innogy's background. We have been a very successful developer of offshore wind in the UK and in Europe generally, and we've done that through partnerships generally. And we've put up our list here, which you can see. And we've essentially worked with partners locally, whether that's in the UK, Germany, and now Ireland in Dublin Array. So we try and team up, collaborate, and build projects. And as you can see, we built the first ever UK project in North Hoyle, as I say, in Wales. Gwynter Moor at the time was the second largest UK project. Now it's the fifth largest. And we've just completed Galloper, which is the latest operational site at 353 megawatts in England. And the theme here that I think is important is that in all these jurisdictions, there's been a really strong ambition from government to deliver offshore wind. So we've gone to places where the government has produced a vision and an ambitious plan to get an offshore wind industry going. UK's a great example of that. Germany too. Belgium's had some success, and we think Ireland's next. And that's a very exciting thing for the Irish market. And companies like innogy don't take those sort of decisions lightly. We see all the indicators, as Stephen pointed to this morning, to be that this industry is ready to go at scale, and we want to be a big part of that. Other parts of the world we're looking at, the USA, Asia Pacific, and also other parts of Europe. So we have a joint venture in France, and we're looking at Poland, and we'll continue to develop in the UK as that ambition and that collaboration continues. So in Ireland, we have a business that's based out of Kilkenny, which is running onshore projects. We have one onshore operational project, Drogheda Beg. We're putting in for planning on Lyra in the new year. And of course, we're 50% owners of Dublin Array. We're also active in battery storage, and there's a real ambition within innogy to build up our business in Ireland. So it's an exciting time to be involved in the Irish business, and I think for offshore we see huge opportunities, not just on the East Coast, but in floating and beyond. But the talk really is to just bring some of the experience that we've had in the UK. So I want to cover that both at a high level and at a specific project level. And the key parts of the story in the UK have been that we have an ambition and a vision from central government which was driven through very methodically, diligently, to develop an offshore wind industry. And that was clear in the mid-noughties and has got more powerful and stronger as we've gone through time. That vision has been coupled with a very collaborative attitude towards industry players and developers and supply chain OEMs. We've seen in the UK a real desire to get around the table and agree a way forward, appropriate grid provision, appropriate planning regime, and certainty for developers so that we can move forward. And that's crystallized in what we call the sector deal. It's not quite completed yet, and a lot of the development that's happened is predicated on that going forward. But it is a deal, and the UK government talks about a deal because there is subsidy on offer here. There's bill payers money on offer for developers to build these projects. But our side of the deal, in order to take advantage of that subsidy, is to build local supply chains, build skills, build competitive, lowest cost of energy for the consumer. And the story in the UK is that we've kept our side of that bargain to now, and we're going to continue and proceed with it. And I think in Ireland, that kind of collaborative deal could be the way to unlock the Irish market too. So some of the figures you can see, we've got 37 offshore wind farms. We've heard earlier about this 30 gigawatt target. We're talking about a turnover of £6 billion for the industry. It's an enormous industry in the UK and an enormous success story. I think my personal interest in Wales, and if you go to Llandudno, almost every second person works for innogy. I mean, it's an extraordinary story there. Down the east coast, you have towns like Harwich, which I'll come to, Lowestoft, Grimsby in particular, Hull, have been hugely transformed by this industry. And not just the physical aspects of infrastructure on the ground, development sites, operational bases, but actually the people in the town going to colleges, learning the skills, thinking about the future, looking out to sea and thinking about their future and their employment opportunities. It's a very inspiring story, and we shouldn't underestimate that is predicated on a big pipeline, and that the Irish pipeline at this stage doesn't look as big, but it's still possible to deliver those benefits at a different scale around the coastal communities of Ireland. So there's lots of figures, and people will argue over the figures of exactly how many jobs and how many pounds of GVA, but they're sizable in the UK, and that means the government takes this industry very seriously and is willing to come together and work together with the industry to make sure it keeps delivering. So I want to talk about two projects quickly in specific terms, because we can talk about generalities, but actually it's the specifics that matter. Triton Knoll is our latest development project to get a CFD, so is now into construction, reached financial close this year. It's an 855 megawatt site off the Lincolnshire coast. I mean, for those of you who know the geography of the UK, Lincolnshire is not the most affluent part of the country, and that the story of the investment in Lincolnshire is a hugely powerful one. You'll see as well, for some of you who do know the geography, this is very near Skegness. I spent 3 or 4 months of my life that I won't ever get back in a planning inquiry in Skegness, and there are parts of this business that are not all that exciting, so we prepare yourselves for those too. But in the end, when you get there and you start building and you start seeing the transformation, it is an extraordinary process. So to talk about the supply chain, in the UK, as part of the CFD process, we have to produce what's called a supply chain plan. Now, it's important to emphasise that the supply chain plan, and I've underlined it here, is really driven by the UK government towards a focus on competition, innovation and skills. It's not about local content. But the reality is, we as a developer community have always prioritised and encouraged local content and tried to say, as part of this competitive, innovative, skills-driven process, we want to see those jobs and that investment locally. And I think the key understanding from the CFD process is there's no point in government coming forward and saying you must deliver X% of local content. What they need to do is to develop a narrative around skills and competitiveness that encourages developers to go out and do that. Because in reality, is if you mandate local content directly, you will see suppliers in the local market saying, well, you've got to use us, here's our price, and that will drive up LCOE. So, we have to be, I think, cautious about saying there is a number that we have to hit. Instead, if government, as UK government did sensibly, produce a sort of narrative around skills, competition, innovation, the numbers will get there. But it has to be done in that way, I think. So our supply chain plan is put into the CFD process in order to allow ourselves to go forward. as I said here, we had nearly 200 recommendations or commitments and actions. And some of those, just to give you a flavour, are about engagement with supply chain at the early stage, getting support for local businesses to be able to participate, a portal, an individual appointed to audit our supply chain work, and that goes on throughout the process. So at the moment, I think we have 600 local suppliers on our database. We talk to them regularly, we issue out all our tenders, and our tier one contractors have to do the same. So there's always that constant feedback, and these events and engagement opportunities are always there too. So as a result, we expect on Triton Knoll to have over 50% of our total expenditure to be in the UK. 2,600 jobs, 290 in the operational phase, and partnerships with local colleges and enterprise schemes to ensure that that talent, that skill base is developed so that we have a long-term future on the East Coast, in the Humber region, and in Lincolnshire generally. So really you're seeing there an ambition on industry developed to a project level. On Galloper, very briefly, Galloper is a 350 megawatt site off the Suffolk coast. We've just completed it, it's gone into operation this year. And it's actually a partnership with ESB, or I suspect some people in the room from ESB, who are a co-investor in Galloper. Here we have the sort of final numbers, so to speak, and we know that on Galloper, in construction, we have 37% local content, 86% in the operational phase, giving you a 58% total. And to give you an idea of what sort of investment that is in the operational phase, I think it's important for people to think about operations for an offshore wind farm. I mean, we heard earlier from GE about Arco Bank. It's a 20, 25-year investment. These people are employed for the long term, and the money is feeding into the local economy over 20, 25 years. So we see 3.4 million direct and indirect GVA, and we see the kind of businesses involved locally, and we're talking about Essex Coast, sort of groundwork, scaffolders, H&S, everything down to B&Bs and restaurants all benefit. And the big investment, and I think again it's important to think about it in these terms when we talk about local content, is the O&M base. So a £10 million investment in Harwich, again, an area that hasn't seen these sort of investments regularly over the years. 120 local jobs, and using contractors who are locally based, and therefore ensuring that the benefits stay in the local region. So, I mean, there's lots we can say about local content and developing a supply chain, but for me, there's a very key lesson that I think everyone in the offshore wind industry in Ireland should try and encourage government to think about. One is that if we have ambition, and that means a 70% by 2030 target, so we have a big enough potential pipeline so that we can deliver. Then collaboration, and that means getting the industry around the table with government, talking to each other, working together, grid, consents, route to market, and all the people who are potentially engaged, working towards one goal of delivering these targets. Then I think you will see the local economic success. And it's not about mandating a specific number, it's about bringing people together and delivering an industry that delivers for Ireland for the long term. So I think there's an experience there in the UK which I think could be a different scale, but still very, very positive. And we as innogy want to be a big part of that story in Ireland. So thank you.